The reality is that we as a community exist within an incumbent system that at best was not built for us, and more often than not is openly discriminatory or violent. We are on the precipice of a crisis because 10% of the adult population in the US is queer. It is 25+% of Gen Z. So a full quarter of this next generation is living within a system that was not built for them. And they are going to demand differently. And I think right now we're in a position where the incumbent system just is not prepared to answer that call. We are patient-centered. Like, we believe that we come with clinical expertise, and our members, as we call our patients, come with expertise about what it means to be them. And the magic happens when you treat both sets of that expertise equally.
This is Second Opinion. I'm Christina Farr.
I'm Ash the News. And I'm Luba Greenwood.
Welcome to the pod, where each week we navigate what's really going on in healthcare through strikingly candid conversations with the entrepreneurs and investors leading the charge.
Thanks for joining us. Let's dive in.
Hey guys, I'm here with Liana Guzmán, CEO of FOLX, and we have a very fun conversation coming up about just everything that's happening in the state of the world right now, politically, in the state of startups, digital health. Liana is actually a relative newcomer to the space, and I love talking to people who came to healthcare from other industries because I just feel like they have such a fresh perspective. So Liana, I'm so excited to have you on. Thanks so much for joining the pod.
I'm so excited to be here, Chrissy. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have a lot to talk about. FOLX, by the way, if you don't know them, is a virtual clinic for individuals that identify as LGBTQ+, and they do a wide range of services, everything from family planning and behavioral health all the way through to providing HRT for this population. And Liana, I would love to just start there and have you tell us a little bit about why this population is looking for a different type of healthcare than, let's say, the current system can provide.
Yeah, I think the reality is that we as a community exist within an incumbent system that at best was not built for us, and more often than not is openly discriminatory or violent. And I talk a lot about sort of some of my experiences. Like, I think of myself as being at the very top of the pinnacle of privilege. Like, I have lived in affirming places my whole life. I've had, the socioeconomic means to find doctors that, I feel good about. But I think about, like, every time I go to the OBGYN, I am asked in a public setting why I'm not on birth control. And I have to defend it and essentially out myself in public, which I feel comfortable doing for the most part. But I know a lot of people have similar experiences and don't feel comfortable doing that. Or I think about when I was conceiving my son and I worked a couple desks down from somebody, and her IVF journey was covered by our employer because she was married to a cis man and mine was not, because I was married to a woman. And when we moved to Connecticut, I spent hours looking for a pediatrician, and we walked into the office and the form said mother, father. And so I crossed out father, 10 different times and wrote my wife's name and phone number and, contact information. And at the end of the visit, I said, you might want to consider changing it to parent 1, parent 2, or better yet, guardian 1, guardian 2. And I was met with such dismissal that we ended up finding a new pediatrician, which cost my company time. It cost my payer money. And it was a broken experience. And that is literally the best version of healthcare for our community within the incumbent system. It gets significantly worse from there. And we see it in the data. 40% of our community does not seek medical care for fear of discrimination. And of those that do, a full quarter go out of network because they can't get the care that they need within their covered network. And so that is why it matters. And I think it's always mattered, but I think we are on the precipice of a crisis because 10% of the adult population in the US is queer. It is 25+% of Gen Z. So a full quarter of this next generation is living within a system that was not built for them, and they are going to demand differently. And I think right now we're in a position where the incumbent system just is not prepared to answer that call.
Yeah, I mean, so much to unpack just in what you said, and maybe I'll share something personal with you also, which I don't think we talked about, but when I was a child, I watched my uncle die from AIDS after a long battle with HIV. And, it had a massive impact on me because I really saw, just from a super young age, the experiences that he had, whether it be nurses and physicians telling his own mother that she shouldn't touch him or be in a room with him, all the way through to just the loneliness of that experience and discrimination that he faced, and the questions being asked about why he even contracted the disease in the first place. And we saw all of that on a societal level. And yet it feels like we're living at a time when there are people out there that want to deny that everything that you're saying is true and real for this community. And I'm always struck by that, kind of thinking about, the AIDS crisis wasn't even that long ago, and we still see HIV in this community. So, how does that sit with you as somebody who thinks about this kind of in a cultural, historical context, as well as, being an entrepreneur at our present moment?
Yeah. First of all, I'm so sorry about your uncle. I think you and I we're roughly the same age. And so we both probably had very formative experiences in that era. And, I think gratefully, like people like us, it influenced the way that we think about others in healthcare. And so, I often say to folks, to people, it's the problem with our community, but, I often say what we are doing is building the future of healthcare writ large. We happen to be doing it for the LGBTQIA community, and that community happens to be the fastest growing demographic in the US. But I think the reality is, when you sort of look at the broader historical context, healthcare is incredibly broken, right? And I think the reality is, in the US, we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system. So, we essentially take people when they're sick and we try to get them back to being healthy versus a holistic, wellness-oriented approach. And so what we're doing at FOLX is, a whole person, patient-centered, community-based solution to healthcare. And I think those three things are really important, right? Like, we provide not just primary care, but talk therapy, because, it is, the mind-body connection is incredibly important. When you look at our community and you see that we suffer from, higher rates of suicidality, anxiety, depression, heart disease, cancer, STIs, a lot of that is community oriented, right? Like, it is deeply stressful to wake up in our bodies every day with a new onslaught of laws or hatred directed at us. And that stress results in worse healthcare outcomes, right? And a big part of being able to overcome that is not just accessing affirming expert care, but being able to also connect into community, right? Like, I remember when I was pregnant with my son, a bunch of queer friends who were years away from thinking about settling down and starting families. And I had a bunch of straight friends who were starting a family. And I was in Brooklyn, New York, and I felt so lonely because I was the only queer person I knew starting a family. And, that community connection would have just made my experience so much better. And again, that's as good as it gets, right? Like, there are people who are navigating much more difficult moments alone. And, on the one hand, what we're doing is actually just what healthcare should be for everybody. On the other hand, we are doing it for a community that, I think we saw tremendous movement forward for our community in my lifetime, right? Like, when I was growing up, the idea that I would come out in high school was unheard of, right? Like, and I came out in college, and that was really early. Like, I know a lot of people who didn't come out until they were well into their adulthood because they were fearful of the stigma. And I think we've come so far, and I think about my grandfather, who was a deacon in the Catholic Church, and I think had negative views of this community until his granddaughter was a member of the community. And I think what I saw with him is what we saw in society. And I think what we're seeing now is the pushback to that progress. And you're seeing it in this othering of people that is just tremendously cruel and based, frankly, not in fact. And so, I think that is the context in which we're building this future of healthcare and why it is so urgently important for our community. I think we all deserve what FOLX is building, but this community now more than ever deserves it as soon as possible because we don't have other good options.
Yeah. So I feel like, there's the politics, and a big part of me wants to set that aside because it's so much. And, it kind of weighs on all of us, I think, what we're seeing and reading and just witnessing. Let's just talk about the healthcare for a second, because in many ways, to me, what you're saying is not that controversial. You're saying this is a community, they have a set of needs that may be distinct from, the sort of cis white kind of men and women that are known to kind of seek healthcare today, and maybe the system is designed for them. I would argue it's mostly designed for men. But we have been able to get there, I think, with other communities. We can say in a very non-controversial way, women should have their own forms of care because they have distinct needs. And that doesn't feel like it's that controversial anymore. But with your community and the argument you're making, it does seem to be. So maybe just unpack that a little bit, because it's like both obvious and then somehow like, there's so much politics around it.
Totally. Well, I think where I would start is by, which I know like we're not a monolith, right? So it is a different experience depending on your identity within our community. So I think there is this sort of pervasive view that if you're a cis, gay man or lesbian woman, the healthcare system is meant for you. Like, what are you talking about? You don't have differentiated needs. And I think until and unless you're a member of the community or really close to somebody in our community, you could sort of convince yourself that that's the case, right? That why would my experience need to be different from, my straight friend's experience? And I think some of the examples I gave you are the very reason, right? It is just our identities are different, right? And the path to care looks different because of that. The way we build our families, the impact of living in a society. Like, I'll give you another example. There are a lot of states right now that are looking to get rid of gay marriage. And the Supreme Court has already said that they are open to overturning Obergefell, right? So in that context, my wife will have to adopt my son, who is genetically hers, because I birthed him. I want to walk into a therapist where I don't have to explain that, where they are so much a part of this community that they understand the impact, the stress that comes, right? Because that's a financial stressor. That is an emotional stressor. So I think there's that. I think there's the side of it that is actually, I am so accepting of your community that I just don't know why you would need different care. And I think it sort of misses the forest for the trees, right? Like, the CPT codes that we use are the most often used codes in healthcare. The actual specific need may not be different on paper, but the way that we experience that does need to be different because we have so long lived in a world that has not accepted us. Then there is the trans community. And I think it is really important to think about that separately, because this is the most marginalized community, or among the most marginalized in this country right now. You have a political party that has decided that they are going to build a wedge issue around hating an already deeply marginalized group of folks. And so for them, more than anything, I mean, for a lot of our members, it's actually a safety issue, right? Like, going into a provider in their neighborhood can be dangerous. We've heard horror stories of people going to the pharmacy and a pharmacist who's supposed to just fill your medication and ask you if you have questions and maybe provide guidance if you ask for it, really being hard on a patient because they want to know why they're on that medication and who do they think they are, and commenting on what that means and judging them. And so for a lot of our members, it's a safety issue. It's being able to access, knowing you're going to tap into a provider system that you don't have to apologize for who you are. You don't have to wonder. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in my life, I'm in situations where I don't know what people's perspectives are, and I have to be thoughtful about that. And again, I'm deeply privileged. It gets, significantly more dangerous for others. And so I think that is really important. I also think there's a lot of misinformation regarding the trans community. And so coming to a place like FOLX where, we are very focused on, we do literature reviews on a quarterly or more frequent basis. We do difficult case reviews on a weekly basis. We are evidence-based, and we have the largest data set of, sort of queer care in the country. And so, we are able to help people get to the right information, and they know they can trust that. And then the last thing I'll say is layering in that sense of community. I think, there is this perception, like, when you look at some of these ads that the current Republican Party is putting out, they would have you believe that, like, everyone around you is trans or going to transition. And it is a very small percentage of the population. Most gender affirming care is actually for cis men, right? Like, it's hair plugs for a cis man who's going bald. That is gender affirming care.
That's such a good point. I hadn't really even thought about it that way, but you're right. These men need some validation that they're losing their hair, and that's normal, and there is a path for them.
Yes, like, we've decided that there is a societally approved perception of what a cis woman or a cis man looks like. And how many women do you know who are getting breast enlargements or mommy jobs or Botox and no shade. Like all of that is fair. We all have the right to decide how to live to our fullest selves. And so, but the folks that are actually accessing gender affirming care because they're trans, it's a small segment of the population. And so it can be deeply lonely depending on where you live. And I think layering this community element onto the clinical care element and layering that sense of understanding, like it's not just community. It's also like, if you look at our referral network, it's not just, here's a surgeon because we don't do surgery because we're digital. It's also, here's some voice coaches, because if you're trans, that's a part of, can be a part of your health journey. So I threw a lot at you, but I think there are different reasons for different segments of our community in different historical contexts. What is true across the board is that we have always existed and we will always exist.
Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the conversation after a word from our sponsors.
If you're the decision maker at your company, we have great news for you, for your HR department, and for your employees. A new and future-forward way to do health benefits is here from Thatch. Not only do your employees get better health benefits with Thatch, but you save an average of $1,620 per employee per year. That's right, you can save over $1,600 per employee per year. Plus, Thatch reduces the time your HR department spends administering benefits. Businesses all over the country love Thatch's breakthrough approach. Rather than a wasteful one-size-fits-all plan, Thatch empowers your employees by letting them customize their own benefits plans. You save money and time while providing your employees with better health benefits, which works better for everyone. Book a demo with Thatch and we'll send you a $100 gift card. Visit thatch.ai/HR to book a demo for your gift card. That's thatch.ai/HR. Today, I'm excited to share a true scientific breakthrough for your long-term health. C15, the first essential fatty acid discovered in 90 years, and it's 3 times better, broader, and safer than omega-3. Dr. Stephanie Van Watson discovered C15 while working with the US Navy to improve the health of aging dolphins. Here's why this matters. Many of us are deficient in C15, resulting in weaker cells that make less energy and quit working earlier than they should. This makes us age faster, sleep poorly, and feel sluggish. C15 is a science-backed, vegan-friendly supplement with pure C15 as its only ingredient. It strengthens your cells, improves mitochondrial function, and protects against damaging free radicals, supporting better metabolic, heart, and liver health, plus deeper sleep and healthier hair, skin, and nails. Unlike fish oil supplements that often go bad, Fatty 15 naturally protects against oxidation. It even comes in a beautiful reusable glass and bamboo jar with eco-friendly refills. Ready to restore your long-term health? Get 15% off your 90-day subscription starter kit at fatty15.com/second-opinion using code second-opinion at checkout. This show is sponsored by Midi Health. There are certain things that come with age: wisdom, experience, and knowledge, to name just a few. But if you're a woman over 40, it can also bring some less desirable things. Hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, all symptoms of menopause and perimenopause. Yes, hormonal transition is a fact of life, but that doesn't mean you should have to accept its symptoms as just another part of aging. The experts at Midi Health understand what you're going through and know how to help. Midi Health is the only virtual care clinic for women navigating midlife hormonal transition. They support you with safe, effective, FDA-approved medications, as well as supplements, lifestyle coaching, and preventative health guidance. What's more, all their services are covered by insurance, and they're conveniently accessible through telehealth visits and 24/7 messaging. If you're over 40, use all that wisdom you've gained over the years and visit Midi Health. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. So let me just ask you about the sort of provider side of things, because I do know this podcast is listened to by the provider community, which is incredible. Like, thank you so much for tuning in. But if they're listening to this and wondering, what can I do in my own practice? How can I be better? Do you have any thoughts on just, what are some things that they could try? And I know that this isn't, you're not training them necessarily, or I mean, that is part of what you do at FOLX, but I know that it's not a silver bullet, and it's not like you can try 5 things and immediately overnight, but any kind of things that spring to mind like that.
I think it's important to acknowledge that the average clinician graduates with 5 hours of LGBTQIA training. before they start practicing. Our clinicians have 10 years of experience. So first of all, I would say acknowledging that you may be deeply well-intentioned and you may be deeply affirming, but you may lack the expertise. And being able to say to, your patients, hey, let me connect you into a service like FOLX, not because I don't want to care for you, but because I think the best way to care for you is to get you to people who are doing this day in and day out. But I think beyond that, sort of like, what does it look like for providers who, maybe we're not the right referral network, they want to continue providing care. And it is, some of it is taking ownership of your own education around it. And some of the things that come to mind are your intake forms. Like, I go back to that pediatrician example. It is not hard to reprint forms that say parent 1, parent 2, or that offer multiple pronoun options and a blank space in case somebody doesn't see themselves represented in the multiple choice options. I think training your team, like California passed legislation about a year ago, I want to say, that requires clinicians to undergo affirming training. And I think that is incredibly powerful. So training your staff on, again, to use myself as an example, like, don't sit in a public waiting room and say, what do you mean you're not on birth control? You should be on birth control. You're in your 20s. And, having that more sort of, because the assumption in that line of questioning is that I'm straight. So now I have to overcome your assumption, which should not be my job as a patient, right? Like, you should come in with no assumptions and be listening to me as the patient. And I think that brings me to the third point, which is one of the things that I think is really special about the FOLX model that I think all clinicians can take on really quickly is we are patient-centered. Like, we believe that we come with clinical expertise, and our members, as we call our patients, come with expertise about what it means to be them. And the magic happens when you treat both sets of that expertise equally and you bring them together to decide what a care plan looks like. And so I think, having that sort of, not I'm the doctor, I know everything. I'm the doctor and I bring this set of experience or expertise. Tell me about what it means to be you in your body. Let's bring those two things together to figure out the magic of your care going forward. And then the last thing I'll say is acknowledging, like, we all make mistakes. And I think there is a fear sometimes of like, I don't want to make a mistake, so I'm just going to pull away from trying. And I would say, like, try.
Yeah. And it's a good advice in every aspect of life. Like, try, be willing to make mistakes, be willing to own those mistakes. That we seem to be kind of missing that sometimes in just the way that we live our lives today. Like, we're sort of expected to be perfect, and people feel a lot of resentment about the idea that they have to be perfect. And so I love what you just said about, no, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to put one, foot in front of the other. Just try to make a step. So for you as a business, you've been through a lot, over the last couple of years. And when you joined the business, you weren't the founder, but you joined as CEO. And that was a couple of years ago. And I remember when it happened, because I was like, oh, Liana's great. She's the perfect choice for this company. But when you joined, it was just a different time, like both, in terms of digital health really doing very well as an industry. And maybe now I would say it's there's more skepticism. It's harder. And then the field that you're in has also become more challenging. There's just I find myself every day thinking about, how things have changed, and it just feels so dramatic at times. And so how much do you kind of adapt to this present moment, and how much do you stay true to, all the reasons that you came in and wanted to do this company in the first place? Just curious about, like, it's a big change. We've been through a big change, and both in the market and culturally. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's like we've been through a big change societally in a lot of ways. It doesn't feel that way. In some ways, it feels like FOLX is built for this moment, right? So when I joined, we were exclusively a direct-to-consumer cash pay business. We were exclusively offering gender-affirming hormone therapy to the trans community via digital health services. And a lot of the work that we've done across the last few years is around expanding access. So which was always the vision when AG founded it, but to expand to the broad LGBTQIA community.
Oh, and explain AG just to folks who don't know.
AG is the founder. And she co-founded Humedica, went on to help launch Optum Ventures, an incredible healthcare leader and an incredible, partner and mentor to me. Chrissy, as you mentioned, I don't come from the healthcare space. So part of my willingness to take this role was knowing that I was going to be surrounded by people who were deeply experienced in healthcare and that I could bring sort of a first principles approach to it. And I had some pattern recognition. I've worked throughout my career in exclusively, as in disruptive companies within spaces that are deeply entrenched and heavily regulated. So there was a lot of pattern recognition I could bring to the role, but my ability to do that also rested on my ability to partner with folks like AG and the executive team who have deep healthcare experience and expertise. And so, I think for me, so it's not just broadening the scope of services, like really investing in the community platform, investing in building out the mental health offering, but also the ways in which people can access our care. So we're always going to have a cash pay offering. And I think you see why in this moment, right? As people who work for the federal government are losing coverage for this care, we want to make sure they always have a place they can go to. But also, we've started accepting insurance so that hopefully we can bring this care more cost effectively to people who are insured, and then partnering with employers to bring this care to their employees. And so what I would say about this moment is it feels like, in some ways, Christy, and I don't know if this is a terrible analogy, but it feels a little bit like a tsunami, where if you're not a member of this community, this feels shocking. For us, we've been saying since we were founded, there is a looming crisis in healthcare. Our community is not well served. We have got to fix this. And so I think what you're seeing now is sort of the broader appreciation of that fact. But for us, that hasn't shifted. And I think the thing that has shifted is actually just, maybe this isn't a shift, but we just feel further validated in the work that we're doing. Like, it is so fulfilling every day to get on calls with patients who are saying, thank you for existing. You're saving my life. And I think for me, you mentioned this earlier, it's hard right now. Like, we're all overwhelmed with the news and what's happening and understanding what our role should be within it. I feel deeply grateful that every day I get to wake up and for a living do work that I think is helping to alleviate some of the pain that's being caused by this administration. And so I think for us internally, it is both more difficult because we're just tired. It's hard, especially for trans members of our team. And we feel deeply grateful that in the broader context, we get to do this work every day, and we get to do it with people that we know share our vision and our mission and are connected to the future that we all want to build.
Yeah. And to your point, it definitely makes it the case. What's happening right now, it's sort of undeniable, makes the case for a business like yours should exist, right? So are you seeing a big kind of uptick in growth of folks using FOLX? Like, is the platform benefiting as a business as well?
Yeah. So I always like to say our hypothesis when Trump was running and eventually won was that this would probably be a tailwind to the business. And I want to be really crystal clear. I would trade that tailwind for our community to not be suffering the way it is today. But it has. I think, because we are not federally funded, there are a lot of health systems that are pulling away from this kind of care because they're worried about losing their nonprofit status or their federal funding. And, because we're immune to those challenges, we're able to come in and fill that void for folks who might be losing care wherever they go traditionally. And we're seeing a tremendous, January was a record-setting month for us and outdone only by February, which, we just closed a few days ago and was also record-setting. And so I do think people are, and partially because I think they want to put, we're seeing this more broadly, but people are voting with their dollars. And I think they want to support, even if they have a provider that they like, they want to be part of an organization that is deeply committed to this community in this moment. The other exciting thing is we're seeing a lot of inbound interest from employers and payers and health systems, which wasn't a given. I think in this moment, it is very scary if you're running a large health system. And again, you take on federal dollars or if you're an employer whose CEO is sort of publicly saying, we don't believe in DEI, what we're seeing is that a lot of HR professionals and payers are almost doubling down because they feel like, well, I have a fiduciary responsibility to my employees, and I feel really inept in this moment on how to care for them. And so I'm going to find partners who can help me solve for that. So yeah, I will say there are heartening signs that the shock and awe of the administration is not translating to the reality of our ability to provide care and the reality of our community's ability to access care.
Yeah, maybe I'll kind of share something interesting that I've observed just in my time in the industry, that like, you know, if you look at a company like Maven Clinic, which, you know, is really focused on the female population, but Kate has spoken openly for years about how hard it was to convince anybody that Maven needed to exist who was not female. And she spent a long time trying to convince like a lot of male investors that Maven should exist and didn't really get anywhere. And at a certain point, she just kind of gave up. And then she started to Go to Women. And she raised every single round of financing basically from the Series A. And somebody will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was basically every round between Sequoia, Jess Lee, Dina Shocker at Lux, then Holly at General Catalyst. It's just been women, women, women. So I think she just kind of said, you know what? I have some natural allies. I'm going to go find them. And I just hope that our industry kind of reaches that stage of maturity where, you know, businesses like yours can just go and find people who are willing to support them and willing to back them, who just get it. You know, you may not be able to convince everybody, but I would love for you to not have to, you know, and I want that to be true for all the companies in digital health that are doing something for a community, for a population that needs them and is tremendously loyal as a result. Like, I just hope that there's allies out there for all these companies, because they like yours all deserve to exist. That's just my 2 cents.
Look, I completely agree. And I mean, unfortunately, I just think the only thing that will change it is the success of companies like Maven and hopefully FOLX, where eventually what will happen is that there will be an understanding that there is a risk in not appreciating the opportunity of an experience that doesn't mirror yours. You know what I mean? And so I'm sure the path to Maven is littered with men who wish that they had taken the meeting or followed up and invested.
And I've talked to many of those men, and I completely agree. And I think all we're saying here is not all healthcare should be one size fits all. People are different and they may require a different experience of care, and not all providers are equipped for that. And, you know, I think there is something non-controversial and controversial about it at the same time, but I think we can all get that on some level, right?
Total. And, you know, the thing for me is, I'm not asking folks to come in and believe in this business in this like soft, touchy-feely way. Like, we've never pitched ourselves as an example, a DEI business. Of course, we believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but actually we make good business sense for you if you're an employer. We can help you save money and drive productivity and take better care of your people, which drives retention and can be a good hiring tool. But the same is true in like a fundraising environment. Like, you look at something like mental health that is deeply crowded and commoditized, and it is very hard to make money. And our mental health clinic has been like, we have been on the right, like in the green since launch. So you don't have to believe in us because you want to do the right thing. I mean, I hope that that's part of it.
So you're saying we can be capitalists and it's okay.
We can. And actually the things go hand in hand. Like, why you should care about this community is because there are so many of us. Right. And so you should care that you should care about 25% of the next generation. Like, I just think, to me, to be a human in this world means caring about the people around you, and you should care about a full quarter of the next generation. And by the way, that means that this company has an opportunity to dominate within a quarter of the coming population, where others are sort of operating in commoditized places. Like, it's just you can do good and do well at the same time. And I would actually argue you can do much better if you're focused on doing good, because particularly as you look at the next generation, like, they care about that. Like,
I love it.
I've seen this in my personal life. Like, how many people do you know who have stopped going to Target?
Not many.
See, so I'm like, everyone I know is like, oh God, I have a birthday party and I can't buy a Target gift because I'm mad at them.
I feel like I just live in a community where there is a Target and not much else. But yes, I think everything you're saying is right. And I love the do well by doing good thesis. I think that's what health tech, it's a harder industry, but I think it offers that. And With that, I will say thank you, Liana, for joining us on the podcast. We've loved having you, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Oh, I love it. I always love chatting with you, Chrissy, so thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning in to Second Opinion. Share it with colleagues and friends and message us to let us know what topics you want to discuss on the podcast. If you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and make sure you are subscribed. And check out Christina's Second Opinion newsletter on Beehive. A link to subscribe is in the episode description. Second Opinion is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Turpentine VC, Age of Miracles, and more shows for experts by experts in tech.
Hey everyone, Eric here. At Turpentine, we're building the first media outlet for tech people by tech people. We're the network behind the show you're listening to right now. We have a slate of hit shows across a range of topics and industries, from our AI and investing cluster of podcasts, to shows that drive the conversation in tech with the most interesting thinkers, founders, investors, and influencers, like Econ 102 with Noah Smith. We're launching new shows every week, and we're looking for industry-leading sponsors. If you think that might be you and your company, email me at ericaturpentine.co. That's ERIK at turpentine.co, and let's partner together.